I want you to know that I sense an undercurrent at this conference. I'm here in the middle of a golfing mecca. I know that the most significant social activity at this conference was going golfing. And whoever scheduled this conference had the just dumb luck of scheduling it the same week that the PGA Tour was just up the street, right around the corner. So to tell you a little bit about what we're going to talk about this afternoon, I've sketched out the annual giving environment. Here it is. And stick with the analogies here. Now, when we tee off and launch our annual giving appeals, it's tempting for some of us to make excuses, right? The rough was too thick. The wind is blowing too hard. My students graduate with too much debt, so they can't give. The economy is really awful. There's always a reason to sort of blame something other than your game, right, for why we're not doing better at the moment. Here's the golf bag. And let's see, is my laser printer work? Yeah, here, my laser pointer. This driver, I call this my phone-a-thon driver. I know anytime I pull that club out of the bag, I can hit a 300-yard phone-a-thon. But over the last couple of years now, it takes 50 phone calls to get one person on the phone to even talk to about the phone-a-thon. So this club that was a cornerstone in my bag for a long time now is a little bit threatened in my game. Here's my direct mail 3-wood there. I have a gift processing office that's perfectly equipped to process paper checks that we get back from our paper mailings. They don't want to hear about recurring giving. They don't want to hear about credit card giving. They just got the process down for how we process paper checks, right? What's missing from my bag now is the whole Facebook wedge. Is the whole Twitter, social media aspect to this. I would argue, really for the first time in annual giving, our game is kind of caught out of position a little bit at the moment. You may have an annual giving director who made their whole career in the phone-a-thon, and now, phone-a-thons are sort of plateauing as a revenue source, and that annual giving person is a little bit lost about how to do prospect segmentation or how to do social media, and how do we reconcile that. And it's tempting to say it's the economy, it's too much student debt, a lot of other external factors. But I don't want to just come here today and have a pity party with the idea that if it's a little bit of our fault that we're not keeping the right clubs in the bag that are going to help us really succeed in annual giving, it's not the fault of my audiences if I'm just not equipped at the moment to go about that the right way. Here's a diagram of the mind of your prospects. Oh, I forgot my leaderboard joke. While you're on the course, you're always checking the leaderboard, right? And now the metric becomes what? Well, I'm doing really lousy on the course today, but I'm not doing any worse than anybody else on the leaderboard, right? And you send your annual giving director to conferences, and they come back and tell you that flat is the new up, right? That bogey golf is the new par golf, right? And what else happens? You look at some of the names on the leaderboard and you say, I'm not sure that they're counting strokes exactly the right way. And so, is that participation rate as high as they think it is? So, again, what's sometimes dangerous about peer groups is that we content ourselves in being not any worse than everybody else. And does that sometimes stifle sort of innovation and creativity when I say, well, my game's lousy today. I can't even find the fairway, but at least I'm not any worse off than any of these other people here. That brings me to the green. And this is the mind of your prospect. And Jim Langley touched on this yesterday, and I agree with him, especially when he talked about the idea of mutual funds as what are people interested in. Most of the history of annual giving, we send out a letter that we hope appeals to everybody. I mean, the putt on an annual giving green is always one straight direction, because we can only say one homogeneous thing to most everybody, right? But here's a line from somebody that really wants to hear about how gifts benefit students, right, and scholarships. Here's a line from somebody who just thought the time they spent at your college was the best time of their lives, and they're just nostalgic about those memories. Here's a line from somebody who feels a sense of gratitude and just wants to give something back to your college. And so, there's a lot of breaks in this green, right? And we're trying to understand what's going to resonate with most of the people in our annual giving program. And Jim's right in saying that to the extent we can start to learn what floats everybody's boat, whose green slopes in one particular way. And people can have a couple of different slopes, right? It's not just one thing that gets baked into the cake about what makes you decide to be a donor. It can be a number of things. And how do we solve that riddle from an annual giving point of view? How do you read that green and sort of get a sense about what's going to float somebody's boat? And we'll talk about that a lot as we go this morning, too. Okay, enough golf analogies. I thought you'd all enjoy this quote. I manage a listserv called FundList that is good therapy for annual giving people. And not that long ago, somebody posted this question. I'm looking for serious help. I had a meeting with my manager recently, and there are rumblings that we should scrap our phone-a-thon and get rid of the annual fund and focus on using the position for major gifts. I, being the annual giving officer, disagree on both points, of course, but it looks like I'm going to have to justify why. I love this line. Both my manager and my VP come from the healthcare sector, and it's their first time fundraising for a post-secondary. They're a little slow coming from healthcare, I guess, is the point that's being made. So you got to help these people understand. So, you know, there's a couple thousand people on this listserv. So the annual giving crowd comes galloping down the hill, right? How sad this would be to see. This reads like a horror story. Why do folks propose? What a terrible idea. A terrible mistake that would hamper any chance of success for any type of fundraising in the long term, right? So, you know, it's just all a group hug for annual giving. And I don't mean to tell you your way of going about business, but I read this and I said, good for that manager to be not assuming anything, right? Every day we come in, why are we doing things just because we did them yesterday? And I think it's fair for us to remind ourselves, why have annual giving at all? And you know, to sort of follow on things Jim was saying yesterday. You know, if we're not going to be a pipeline for the rest of advancement, if we're not going to be serving meaningful, measurable roles in development, we can't just assume the existence of annual giving because we've always had annual giving. There's plenty of other things that have gone away over the last couple of years. Some very near and dear to my heart. We'll talk about the poor people at Kodak in a couple of minutes, but I'm here to tell you that your staff does not deserve a pass just because we've always had annual giving. If you can't define how annual giving is adding to the development enterprise at this institution, it's not your fault. So let's remind ourselves for a minute, why do we even have annual giving? And you know, the great thing about my work is that everybody does annual giving. The challenging thing about my work is everybody does it a little bit different everywhere you go. And different people have different goals for what they're trying to accomplish in annual giving. So it's not for me to tell you what you ought to be doing with annual giving. But here's my short list of what I think is valuable in terms of what annual giving provides. We certainly like the gift income, especially unrestricted, undesignated income, which we'll talk about in a minute. I think it's a really critical bridge from who's got affinity for this place to who's willing to raise their hand and make a statement about it. If I had a dollar or a euro or a pound or a rupee now from every place I've been where people say to me, Bob, you got to understand, our alumni love this place. They just don't choose to express it through their giving. It's not their fault if you haven't taught them to raise their hand and express that. And so I think that's a pretty big marker when somebody raises their hand and makes that statement. These days, with electronic screening and prospect segmentation and data mining, you know, it's tempting to sort of shortcut that statement and go straight to a major gift conversation, right? But I really believe that just getting somebody to make even that initial supporter kind of a gesture is an important sort of bridge that people go across. It's a broad measure of alumni satisfaction. That's another way of saying U.S. News and World Report statistics, right? You know, but is my audience, do they seem to be in a happy mood about the institution? It's a personal sort of a read on, you know, what does somebody feel about us in particular? You know, do they want to be a member of the Wheaton Associates, or do they just want to be a $100 supporter of the college? Can be a window on individual interests, and can be an effective pipeline for major gifts. I think one of the ways annual giving doesn't do as good a job as it ought to do these days is really being that pipeline for your major gift fundraising programs. We still work too much in silos at places I get to. You ought to have the expectation that the annual giving staff is graduating people to major gift conversations.